What's up, guys? D-Rock 1992 here. For this video, in my About Actors and Actresses series, I'm going to talk about one of the great comedians of today. Definitely one of today's great comedians. He is one of the great slapstick comedians. Uh, he's one of the great slapstick, physical-like comedians of our time, and I would argue ever. I mean, the guy is laugh out loud funny. The guy I'm talking about is actor Jim Carrey. He's been a successful guy for a while now. Pretty much. I mean, the guy's been in some bad movies, but also he's been in some great classics, as well. And I will touch on some of these great classics as I go along in this video. He is just a natural comedian. He is really, I don't know if he would be in my top 10 personally. Maybe just outside, something like that. Like I've said before, I have to come up with a top 10 list. And I'll put that on another video. My top 10 actors and actresses. But anyway, I'm going to get right into it. He started his career all the way back in 1983. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe, since in the mid-90s, in the mid to late 90s, that's when he started getting popular. Mid-90s, pretty much, is when he became a superstar. So it's hard to believe that 1983 was the start of his movie career. His first movie appearance was a movie called The Sex and Violence Family Hour. His first theatrical film appearance was a movie called Copper Mountain in 1983. So basically, the time between 1983 and big year coming up, I'm not going to reveal the year yet, but as I go down the list, there really aren't a whole lot of movies starting out that he was in that I even really knew. I mean, the guy had to work at it. He's an outstanding example of one of those actors who really had to work hard to get fame. Fame didn't come to him immediately, or in like 2 or 3 years after he made his debut. Jim Carrey had to work at it. One of the memorable roles that I saw him in was like, I saw the movie and I'm like, that's Jim Carrey. 1988's The Deadpool, which is most famous as a Dirty Harry movie. For those of you who don't know, Dirty Harry was a character portrayed by Dirty Harry Callahan, I believe, was a character portrayed by Clint Eastwood. And in The Deadpool, he played a rocker. He played a rock star. But it was a very small role, and I think his character gets killed off in the movie. So there you go. It was a role he was in, but it was a very small role, but he dies in the movie, basically. So there you go. But that's really one of the big ones one of the big movies, one of the only ones I'm really going to talk about from his early career that I remember him being in. Television-wise, actually, he was on, in the 80s, he was on a show called The All Night Show in 1980. So that's the earliest time he was in show business, 1980. 1984, he was in a short-lived series called The Duck Factory, which did not... I mean, it only had 13 episodes, and it didn't do It didn't do particularly well, but it's most notable for being Jim Carrey's first lead role in a Hollywood production. That was his first big role. That kind of... It didn't... I mean, I don't think it brought him a ton of attention because, 13 episodes, it wasn't a whole lot. But the next show brought him some attention, and that was from 1990 to 1994. He was in the show In Living Color. Basically, think Saturday Night Live and think of it in Living Color. They're pretty much the same thing, musical act, sketches, a lot of comedy. It's a comedy sketch show, basically. Think Saturday Night Live when you think In Living Color. Jim Carrey was on the show with the Wayans brothers. I think it was their creation, pretty much. Marlon Wayans. There's Marlon Wayans. Let me see here. Keenan, Damon. Keenan Ivory Wayans, Damon Wayans. They were on the show. Jim Carrey actually was on the show for its entirety. He was one of the few people on that show that was on the show from 1990 to 1994. And In Living Color was a success. I believe it was... Oh, it was a Fox Network show. I actually thought it was MTV, but it was Fox. It was Fox, and In Living Color, maybe a small part contributed. A little side note: In Living Color maybe was a small part of Fox's big popularity when it came out in the late '80s. Fox had The Simpsons, The Cosby Show, not The Cosby Show. The Simpsons, Cops, and Married with Children, along with In Living Color. So In Living Color was a big success for Jim Carrey. It got him in front of a national audience. It got him known. People started recognizing that this guy was talented beyond belief. And then, after his career in Living Color, in 1994, year he left, he got big in movies. 1994, I would argue, is one of the greatest years ever it's one of the greatest years ever for any type of actor. For any actor in particular. I can only think of one off the top of my head. 2004, Ben Stiller was in a lot of movies that I liked. He was in like 5 or 6 movies, and I talked about it actually on my Ben Stiller video. But anyway, 1994 was a huge year for Jim Carrey. It put him on the map as a superstar. The first movie I'm talking about, he made 3 movies in 1994, and all of them were big hits. The first I'm going to talk about is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. He was in this movie with Courtney Cox, best known as Monica on Friends. And he basically is a detective who investigates, who solves animal-type crimes, based on the title, pretty much. I've never watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, but one of the other movies that he made in 1994 is a pretty dumb comedy. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'm still gonna... But anyway, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective is that type of... Jim Carrey just acts really goofy. From the clips that I've seen of it, there's a particular scene where he's imitating somebody with his butt, basically. He picks up his butt and he talks in a weird voice, and I mean, it's crazy. He has a tutu on in one particular scene. Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, I'd argue, is probably one of his stupidest comedies, but I mean, it was a big hit. I don't think it was as big a hit with critics, but it was a good. It really introduced Jim Carrey. It really. I don't think that movie made him a superstar. I think it got people people recognized him even more. The next movie he made was The Mask. It was, as I talked about in the video about Cameron Diaz, this was her film debut. What a debut to have, basically. The Mask is a classic comedy. It's my favorite out of them. I've watched the movie, and I really liked it. I liked it a lot. Jim Carrey plays this guy Stanley Ipkiss, who gets a mask, basically, and he's a boring type of individual. Then he gets the mask, a green mask on his face, and suddenly he's the lime of the light. He is the star. He is charismatic. He's ballsy. He's all this type of thing. And it's just funny to watch. The Mask is, I would recommend it for anybody. It's a good comedy. But the next movie that I'm going to talk about was what made Carrey a star. And that was Dumb and Dumber. I mean, first of all, I'm going to talk about Ace Ventura: Pet Detective real quick. There was a sequel for Ace Ventura: Pet Detective in 1995. That sequel's Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. I think When Nature Calls, I don't think it did as well as the first. But I'm going to have to get watching both of those movies in particular. But those were the two that Jim Carrey made right there. But Dumb and Dumber, this introduced the world to him. He became a star with Dumb and Dumber. And it's been a long time since I've watched it. I remember watching it actually with my girlfriend in high school. We watched it at my old house, and I thought it was pretty funny. From what I see of it, it was from what I saw of it, it was I guess it was pretty funny, but not the greatest I've seen. And a little something quick. I mean, Dumb and Dumber's. Yeah, it made Dumb and Dumber. Jim Carrey was a star in this movie. There's no denying that. And of course, coming out in next week, I believe, is Dumb and Dumber 2, with him and Jeff Daniels from the first film. Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels reprising their roles. I'm not as excited about Dumb and Dumber 2. I mean, maybe it'll change if I watch Dumb and Dumber again. It's been like I said, it's been a long time since I've watched Dumb and Dumber. I don't know. I'm just not as hyped about Dumb and Dumber 2 as other people are. And I like Jim Carrey. I mean, I really like Jim Carrey. He's a great comedic actor and all that. But Dumb and Dumber is, the basic gist of it is that Jim Carrey plays Lloyd Christmas, and Jeff Daniels, I'm not even gonna, let me see here. Jeff Daniels plays Harry Dunn, and Lloyd and Harry, they have to they've got to go find this girl, I believe. They want to go find this this girl in Colorado or something like. No, actually, they have to return a briefcase full of money to its owner. They have to go out to Aspen, Colorado. And Dumb and Dumber, huge success at the box office and with critics. and with critics. I think Dumb and Dumber, in particular, it got a 64% rating. It's so that's very good in Rotten Tomatoes standards. But anyway, enough about 1994. Huge year for Jim Carrey. Now, how would he follow it up? 1995, he made a couple of movies. He was in Batman Forever as the Riddler in 1995, or Dr. Edward Nygma, who became the Riddler. It is a very zany performance, one you'd expect from Jim Carrey. I think some people, criticized the casting, but I really think it fit him tremendously. He's got that zany attitude. You know, he's got that zany personality and that characteristic about him that the Riddler kind of had. The 1960s Batman TV show had the Riddler in it, had the Riddler as a star in it. And the guy, Batman was a very campy TV show, the Batman TV show in the 60s. So it definitely... The Riddler was very campy as well, along with the other characters, but Jim Carrey as the Riddler, I think, was a brilliant move by the creators of Batman Forever, the producers and the director and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a great move. And the movie didn't do as well as other Batman movies. But the director, I believe, was a guy named Joel Schumacher. And I had Val Kilmer as Batman, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, Chris O'Donnell as Robin, but yeah, Batman Forever didn't do as well, but I think the move to cast him as the Riddler was brilliant. As I said before, in 1995, he starred in the sequel to Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. Now we go to 1996, and he stars in another big film of his, a big film I have not watched yet. I'd love to someday. The Cable Guy. Starring Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey. This movie I know is about Broderick's character hires this TV guy, this TV fixer-upper guy, a TV repairman. That's what it is. A TV repairman. He hires a TV repairman to fix his TV, and I think fix his TV and all that. And the guy is a creep. The TV repairman is a creep. He wants to be Matthew Broderick's friend so badly, and at least that's the general gist of the plot that is from The Cable Guy. But yeah, The Cable Guy's one movie I'd like to watch. It also, I know The Cable Guy was big in Jim Carrey's career. It's just another big movie in the career of Jim Carrey. A very well-known film in the Jim Carrey filmography. 1997, he comes out with another very popular film, Liar Liar. This is where I've never watched it, and I know I keep saying I've never watched a lot of these movies and stuff like that from any actor or actress. I definitely have to someday, but Liar Liar is... The basic plot of it is Jim Carrey, his character always says no, and Jim Carrey's kid has a birthday wishes him to say yes, and be a better dad because of it. But Liar Liar, another big success in the Jim Carrey filmography. 1998, he comes out with The Truman Show. This is a little bit of a departure because this is more of a serious comedy. It's a satirical social science fiction comedy drama, all into one. And basically, Jim Carrey plays a guy named Truman Burbank who doesn't know that every single move of his, every single daily activity of his, and every single bit of life he lives is portrayed on television by, an audience sees him on television it's the ultimate reality show, pretty much. It's the ultimate reality show type movie. And another big Jim Carrey film, for sure. The next movie on the list that I'm going to talk about is one that I have seen, and I think it's very funny. One of my favorites, Me, Myself, and Irene in 2000. This is where Jim Carrey's character has a multiple personality disorder, and he has to, along with, he stars in the movie with Renee Zellweger. So in this movie, Chris Cooper is in the movie as well. But Me, Myself, and Irene, a guy who has multiple personality disorder, he has to help. He's running from the cops, basically. He is a cop who has multiple personality disorder. He's running from his other cop friends because he's a danger, basically. So they run, and they're on the run. He's a danger because of his multiple personalities, so they're running from the cops. Also, alongside that, they have to solve a mystery, basically. They have to defeat this guy who was in Renee Zellweger's life, an ex-boyfriend of Renee Zellweger's character. So, two things in one. This is a movie directed by the Farrelly brothers. The Farrelly brothers are great comedically. They just know how to produce that gross out type of humor. They're very famous for it. But Me, Myself, and Irene, a big success in the Jim Carrey filmography. 2000, also, he comes out with Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. This really was my first big exposure to Jim Carrey. As a child, I owned the DVD. I owned the VHS tape, actually. I owned the videotape of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and it was a movie that I really loved. This, of course, is from Dr. Seuss's tale, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And Dr. Seuss, or Jim Carrey as the Grinch, was just pretty funny at the time. It's been years since I've watched the movie, but definitely, it was one that I remember quite fondly from my childhood. In 2003, Carrey comes out with Bruce Almighty. And just this year, I watched it for the first time. And I gotta say, it's very funny. It's Jim Carrey really at his best. It's one of my favorite Jim Carrey movies. Bruce Almighty, about this guy who gets fired from, who just has the worst day possible, gets fired from his job, gets fired from his job and all that at the news station. Terrible day. He gets contacted by God, who is played appropriately by Morgan Freeman. I actually reviewed Bruce Almighty on my page too. So basically, on this channel, Bruce Almighty, Bruce, the character that Jim Carrey plays is Bruce Nolan. He becomes Bruce Almighty, essentially. He becomes God, basically, for a day. Morgan Freeman's character, God gives Bruce Nolan the powers of his powers for a day or so. And Bruce Nolan, Jim Carrey's character, really enjoys it a lot. And Bruce Almighty's just a very funny comedy, in my opinion. It's one of his best. 2004 was a pretty good year. This next movie, I know I've never watched it, but I know it's an absolute departure from what Jim Carrey normally does. And that is 2004's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This really proved that Jim Carrey could act dramatically. This really proved, it really proved he could be a dramatic actor, as well as his usual comedic, zany type of acting. Me personally, I know him really only as a comedic actor. You know, the comedic, zany, slapstick type humor. I don't really know him as that dramatic actor. But Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was one of those movies where he was a dramatic actor. He was very restrained. And I think a lot of critics really liked that about him. Because a lot of critics really go for the acting aspect of an actor. Also in 2004, he comes out with Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. I watched the movie years ago. Jim Carrey plays Count Olaf. If you don't know about Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, they were a series of books that were released. I think in the 2000s they were released. Written by Lemony Snicket, and there was a series of books. I think there were like 12 or 13 in the whole series. I have like 6 or 7 of them, but I remember them for sure, and I liked the movie. I mean, the movie, from what I remember of it, Jim Carrey was pretty funny as Count Olaf. So, definitely something I remember there. 2005, he comes out with a remake of the movie Fun with Dick and Jane. I think the original, let me check it out here. Fun with Dick and Jane was a 1977 comedy film. And 2005, Jim Carrey and Téa Leoni are Dick and Jane in this version. Dick and Jane, basically, I think the basis of it, I've watched parts of the movie. I don't think I've seen the whole thing, though. The basis of the movie is that Dick and Jane are this ordinary couple who one day they get pretty wild at it. You know, they get pretty wild, and you know, they are suddenly unordinary. And I think they've robbed banks. You know, they robbed people and robbed a bank in the movie or something like that. Alec Baldwin also is in the movie as well. What I do know is that the remake didn't do very well. It's, I think, one of Jim Carrey's lowest rated movies in his career. In 2008, Jim Carrey makes another stab at Dr. Seuss material with Horton Hears a Who. He stars in the movie with Steve Carell. He plays... Let me see here. He plays Horton, the title character. And I think this movie was a success, if I'm not mistaken. I've never watched it, but 79% of critics gave the film a positive review. That's very good for Rotten Tomatoes. That is good. But it just shows, I think, Jim Carrey has an interest of the material of Dr. Seuss, which just fits him to a T, because Dr. Seuss is known for his zany out there kind of humor. And Jim Carrey is also known for that as well. So it's just a perfect match for that, for sure. Also in 2008, he comes out with Yes Man. He stars in this movie with Zooey Deschanel. Basically, it's kind of what its title says. And I've watched the movie. I thought it was okay. It wasn't anything really special, really, really great. I thought it was okay, though. It stars Jim Carrey and Zooey Deschanel, an early film appearance from Bradley Cooper, before Hangover fame. And for this movie, it's pretty simple. Here's a guy, an ordinary guy, who says no to everything. One day, he has the power to say yes to everything. One day he acquires the power to say yes to everything. And it's a cute film, definitely. I would argue it's a very cute film. Just not the best Jim Carrey film I've seen. But it's worth mentioning because I've watched it and all that. Let's see. Another popular movie he did was 2009's I Love You, Philip Morris, based on a true story of, I believe, a prisoner. He was a prisoner. He plays a guy named Stephen J. Russell, who's a con artist, a famous con artist who was in prison a few times. He was reputed to have escaped from prison many of times before he finally got caught, and I think Stephen J. Russell himself, serving a 140-year sentence, known to be the only con artist in the world serving a 140-year sentence. Yeah. But Jim Carrey makes a movie about that, and I Love You, Philip Morris is a comedy film. Ewan McGregor is in the film. That's what I'm curious to see in the future, for sure. 2009, he has his own version of A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is like a movie that's been released. There's like hundreds of thousands of A Christmas Carol movies. This one is a voiceover for him, and he happens to do most of the voiceover work. He voices Ebenezer Scrooge, Ghost of Christmas Past, Ghost of Christmas Present, and Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. A lot of different roles for him. Again, another one that probably some people know in the Jim Carrey filmography. A couple of years later, in 2011, he comes out with one of his biggest successes in the past few years, Mr. Popper's Penguins. This is about a guy who inherits an entire group of penguins. This is very family-friendly type stuff. In the mid-2000s or so, 2009, with Jim Carrey, he can do a combination of family-friendly films and adult-type films, which is very good. Jim Carrey's really accessible to a wide audience. Adult viewers who love his roles like Dumb and Dumber and Yes Man and all that type of stuff, and some other movies I'm going to talk about. And they also like his family-friendly stuff, Grinch Stole Christmas, Mr. Popper's Penguins, Christmas Carol. He's really that type of actor that can he's really a wide audience. He has a wide audience. A guy like Adam Sandler, per se, I'm going to go with my favorite guy, Adam Sandler. he really, you know what type of movie you're going to get from Adam Sandler. Juvenile, toilet type humor. Not suitable for young children. But with Jim Carrey, you get a whole variety of movies. He's had a whole variety of them in his entire career. And I think that's what's good about it, because he's versatile in that way. And then he can give you the really dramatic type performances like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I'm going to have to watch someday because I hear it's really good. But in 2013, he comes out with probably my favorite portrayal, probably my favorite Jim Carrey character is Steve Gray in The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. I love this movie, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. A lot of people did not like it. It was a critical failure, and I don't think it made a ton of money, but he plays Steve Gray, who's this magician who basically has a supporting role. Jim Carrey, pre-1994 or post-1994, hasn't taken a lot of supporting roles in films. But this one is a supporting role. Incredible Burt Wonderstone. Steve Gray is this magician who isn't really a magician. It's kind of like I don't really know how to say it. He's a magician who isn't really a magician, who specializes in the nutty, the zany. Like, for example, he does this magic trick where he holds his urine for 24 hours straight. He does this one where he drills a hole in his head to try to make a point, kind of. To just do it, basically. But anyway, a guy who does magic, who doesn't really do magic, but he's the main antagonist of the film. And Steve Carell plays Burt Wonderstone. Steve Buscemi's in the movie. Olivia Wilde and Alan Arkin are the other main guys. James Gandolfini, the late great James Gandolfini. But yeah, this Incredible Burt Wonderstone, I love the movie. It is up there in my top comedy films of all time. Also in 2013, he comes out with Kick-Ass 2. And with Kick-Ass 2, a sequel to the first Kick-Ass movie, he plays a guy, Colonel Stars and Stripes. And what's very, very particular about this film, why I bring up the film, is because at the time of the movie being released, I believe, there was a tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School, school shooting. Jim Carrey retracted, after this violence all happened, Jim Carrey retracted his opinion of the movie. He retracted his support of the movie, and he's like, I'm sorry, but I can't condone violence of this nature. I can't support it. Which you can see, definitely, because a school shooting happened. The Kick-Ass movies are very violent movies in nature. I'd love to see them as a movie fan, because of the violence in nature. But some people just take it too far, really. I mean, it's all about, you have these... Yeah, some people just take violence too far, is the basic gist of what Jim Carrey was trying to say. Basically. But enough about that. Anchorman 2, The Legend Continues, was his next movie after Kick-Ass 2. And he had an uncredited cameo in it, and he was a CBC news anchor, a Canadian news anchor, basically. Jim Carrey is Canadian, so it is a play on him, basically. It's a play on Canada. He picks on Canada pretty good in the movie. And, but that's that. That is that. And then you have Dumb and Dumber 2, which is coming out next week. It's one of the most anticipated movies of this year, pretty much. Maybe my opinion will change of it once I see it. Once I actually see it. But right now, as of right now, I'm not as hyped about it as I am with movies like Horrible Bosses 2 is coming out November 26th. I'm hyped about that. I really want to see that movie. But that's it for Jim Carrey's movie career. I don't think he has anything coming up in terms of movies besides Dumb and Dumber 2. Television-wise, after In Living Color, he hasn't really done a lot of television because he hasn't really had to do a lot of television because he's been a big movie actor. He's hosted 3 episodes of Saturday Night Live, 1996, 2011, and this year. He hosted back in October, November, or not November, but I think he hosted back in October. This was a week before Halloween, I believe. And the show that he did host, I thought it was pretty solid. Look up Matthew McConaughey. He does an imitation of Matthew McConaughey in a Lincoln commercial. You know those commercials that come on about Matthew McConaughey and his Lincoln, and the Lincoln car. Jim Carrey does a good impression of it, and his impression of Matthew McConaughey itself is good. He also appeared as himself in 2003. Didn't host, but just appeared as himself. And he was in an episode of The Office in 2011 and 30 Rock in 2012. And that's pretty much all I can really... all worth mentioning about... Oh, and he was in an episode of Sesame Street in 1992. Which fits him, you know. Zany type of humor, you know. He appeals to the younger audiences as well as the older audiences. So that role, that kind of appealed to him. It appealed back then. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Jim Carrey. He is a great actor, great comedic slapstick type actor who I think he would remind a lot of people of Charlie Chaplin back in the day. Charlie Chaplin was this slapstick comedy genius back in the day, one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. And I think a lot of older people, and a lot of newer people too even, that know about Charlie Chaplin, see Jim Carrey and they see some of Charlie Chaplin in Jim Carrey. The way his mannerisms, his slapstick routine, the way he physicalizes it, if it's a word, physicalizes comedy. It's not a word, but yeah, but that's pretty much it for the video. So D-Rock 1992 out.